Last week I was in Almaty in Kazakhstan for this amazing EdCrunch conference. And while I was there, I was assigned a helper or a minder who was one of the local students studying English. My helper's name was Janka, and she was a really, really nice, kind person who helped me a lot with my time there. And while we were there, we went up to the top of some local mountains called Shimbulak Mountains in a big cable car. And we got chatting about her desire to go and study somewhere abroad. And then, as we were talking, it emerged that she suffered from a kind of accent insecurity, despite the fact that she obviously spoke good kind of, B2, C1 level English already. We'd been talking all day. I hadn't had any problems understanding her, or, I hadn't ever had to stop and ask, I'm sorry, your pronunciation is obscuring your meaning. Could you clarify what you're trying to say? Nothing like that. So I asked what she thought the problem with her accent was, and she said, well, I want to sound British. To which I replied, well, that's unlikely to happen, given that you're Kazakh, okay, and that your first languages are Kazakh and then Russian. It's unlikely that you're going to end up having a British accent. It then turned out that on her Instagram feed, she got loads and loads of adverts for these courses, mainly run by Russian methodologists, which were aimed at, helping you to have a British accent. Some of these courses were very expensive, sort of eye-wateringly expensive, and presented by people who had these rather peculiar accents. People who would say things like, hello, I am Svetlana from Moscow, and I have perfected the British accent, and I would like to teach you to also speak the Queen's English. This very kind of forced, peculiar, unnatural kind of, trying too hard sort of accent. I then started thinking, well, what a weird thing to want to do, really. What a weird thing to want to eradicate your own accent and in a way eradicate part of your own identity. My football team, Arsenal, for 20 years we had one of the greatest football managers of all time, Arsène Wenger, who was a Frenchman. And after 20 years of living in London, Arsène Wenger still sounded incredibly French. When he talked, he had a very strong French accent like this. And when Arsène Wenger was once asked about his accent, he questioned the questioner and he said, you are questioning why I sound French, even though I live in England? My friend, the answer is because I am French. And Arsène spoke 5 languages. He was an incredible communicator, an incredible motivator, who never in any way compromised his own sense of where he was from, what his roots were, and what his identity was. And I think part of the problem is that obviously accent prejudice does exist, okay? It exists within the UK. It exists towards particular localised or regionalised or lower class accents. You get things like the English with Lucy channel, which make these videos about the 10 most difficult English accents to understand, which basically means the 10 accents some posh southern girl is least used to hearing. When I hear people say that accents from like Glasgow or Newcastle are difficult, I always think, who are they difficult for? Because if you're from Edinburgh or Aberdeen, Glasgow's not difficult. If you're from Sunderland or Durham, where my mum lives, Newcastle, Geordie accents are not difficult. Difficulty is as much in the ear of the beholder as it is in the producer of the language. And, as someone who's occasionally had snide comments made about my own accent, I think you have to recognise that accent prejudice is a very real thing. It exists. Once you accept that, you're then given this choice. Do you try to adapt that? Do you accept it and try to modify yourself in order to fit into this kind of upper class received pronunciation standard? Or do you fight it and resist it? My own feeling is that it's pretty pointless trying to emulate the accents of people who have power and who will never accept you anyway. Because even if you think your accent will pass in those circumstances, there'll then be things like, yes, but where were you born? What's your actual real name? What did your father do? What schools did you go to? What tie are you wearing? There's all those kind of games that have been created to allow people to identify in-group and out-group people. And accent is part of that process. I think you also have to recognise that attitudes towards accents are rooted in classism. They're rooted in kind of class-based prejudices towards particular communities, particular cities, particular countries. They're also racialised, and they're rooted in colonial legacies, colonial histories. So, in the UK, you sometimes hear racists basically, call a spade a spade. You hear racists making fun of Indian accents in English, or Pakistani accents, or Jamaican accents, or West African accents. And for me, I'm listening to this as a kind of grown adult thinking, wait a minute, we've gone over there, we've colonised these people, we've got rich off robbing their natural resources, we've forced our language upon them, and now in 2023, after the collapse of our empire, you still think it's okay to make fun of the way people speak the language we've imposed on them. Come on, sort yourself out, get real. So I think you have to understand that accent prejudice is rooted in socio-economic and historico-socio-political realities, okay, to do with colonialism, to do with racism. And I've come to see those courses which promise to modify your accent. I mean, you can't modify an accent. You can change an accent, yeah? Those courses which kind of are designed to change your accent are basically part of the same process of changing people's identities to fit some kind of white, upper, middle class, normalised sort of version of reality that's akin to skin bleaching, for example. My wife took our daughter to an exhibition at the Welcome Gallery here. And while they were there, it's about kind of the aesthetics of beauty. My wife realised that there was a skin bleaching cream that her mum had actually used as a Chinese Indonesian, because the idea is that the lighter your skin is, the more beautiful you somehow are. That's a kind of idea that's been imposed on the rest of the world by the white colonising world. People have eye-changing operations to make their eyes look more beautiful. People feel that they have to change their name because their name is alien to native speakers, whatever that means, of a certain kind of English. And I think once you're in a stage where you can communicate successfully, as Janka was, you really, really don't need to work on your accent. You might need to work on being able to understand other kinds of accents, okay? French English or Jamaican English or Glaswegian English or London English or whatever. What you don't need to do is to erase part of your own upbringing, your own linguistic realities, your own identity, and waste your money on these kinds of accent changing courses.